It's now less than 2 weeks until the country picks our new president, and tonight we've our first big interview in the race for the Áras. We're talking to independent candidate Catherine Connolly. Well, good evening and welcome to the first of our big interviews in the race for the Áras, with the two candidates hoping to be president. Independent Catherine Connolly is our first guest this evening. Next week it'll be Fine Gael's candidate Heather Humphreys. The interview slots were assigned randomly. So tonight, for the next half hour, it's Catherine Connolly, and you're very welcome to the big interview, Catherine. You're ahead in the polls. One of the bookies has already paid out on you. But this morning on Tip FM, the former Labour leader and Minister Alan Kelly said the accusations of smear campaigns against you actually suit you, and that you're pushing it in order to quell proper questioning of you.
First of all, thank you, Colette, for the opportunity to be here. And I welcome the opportunity, as I've welcomed every opportunity since I declared in July. And I've stood in front of many press conferences. I've had 4 public forums with 4 independent chairs and made myself available for questions. So your question in relation to this, I have actually focused on myself continuously since the day I declared. I have tried to avoid commenting on other candidates.
But you have spoken about the allegations of a smear campaign.
Well, I think Ivan Yates clarified for us what was happening. And the violence of that language, I actually just read it. I didn't hear it till the next day when I had a local interview down in Tipperary and they played it. And I was doubly hit by the violence of the language, smear the bejesus out of her, use a fair campaign and so on, get the big guns out. So I think he really did me a favour, and he did the people of Ireland a favour by using that language to clarify what Fine Gael were actually doing.
OK, well, hopefully you're open to scrutiny tonight. Absolutely. And I want to begin by asking about perhaps the biggest controversy you've had to battle in this campaign. And this is bringing in a convicted criminal into the Dáil over the course of 6 months, someone who was jailed for 6 years by the Special Criminal Court for serious firearms and ammunitions offences, and she wasn't fully Garda vetted, and yet you continued to sign her in when she came to the Dáil. The Justice Minister, Jim O'Callaghan, said there were rules in place, they weren't followed, and I don't think that's acceptable.
That's absolutely incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. And all of the comments that have been made that I somehow didn't comply with the rules, or that I had an appeal mechanism, or that I spoke to the guards, all incorrect. And so this woman who served her prison sentence, came out early, was fully rehabilitated, who came...
How do you know she was fully rehabilitated?
Because she was absolutely highly recommended by Eamon O'Keefe, who's allowed me to use his name, the former minister and TD, and who was a model prisoner and a model example of rehabilitation. And for me, she was perfectly qualified in the Irish language.
But if you're signing someone into the Dáil every single day on a day pass, aren't you essentially circumventing a security... It's sort of like a technical loophole, isn't it? If they haven't been Garda cleared.
Not at all. So that is the mechanism for signing somebody in. But from day one, her application was being processed. And it took a long time. It wasn't actually processed completely in the end.
So did she ever receive Garda clearance, just to be clear?
I have nothing to do with Garda clearance. So the person filled out the form, absolutely honestly from day one, declared everything. I signed her in every day and I walked out with her. That's the mechanism.
So you don't know whether she was ever fully Garda cleared or fully vetted, or whether she was rejected at all?
What I do know is the process was never completed, and she left because she was only going to do a few months. In any event, she had started her PhD in the prison and she wanted to complete her PhD. And this was a period of time where she was going to just get back into work. And that's what happened. What I'm very upset about, Colette, is actually that this woman's privacy has been utterly trespassed upon. We're here again, and you're rightly asking me questions, but each time her privacy is absolutely trespassed upon.
You said at some stage during the 6 months you sent an email, and you said over the weekend that you might publish that email. Who did you send the email to? Was it to the Oireachtas or to the Gardaí?
Oh, no, I have had nothing to do with the Gardaí. I have no contact with the Gardaí in relation to this. whatsoever. And this is what's important when we look at how this story arose. Unnamed sources, allegations being made somehow that I interfered with some process. Absolutely.
But did it not occur to you at any point, is there something the Gardaí know that I don't, and that's why this clearance isn't coming through? That's why the vetting hasn't been done yet. Like, do you think you know better than the security forces?
I don't know anything about the security forces in the context of this story.
But you had employed people before. The Oireachtas had employed people and they had been cleared within a matter of weeks. Yet there was no vetting forthcoming for this particular individual, and it didn't occur to you, why isn't this happening?
Absolutely, what occurred to me, it was taking a long time, and the email I sent was simply asking, where is this process at?
And who did you send the email to?
Whoever was there, the name is on it, and that's the question, whether I can...
But to the Oireachtas or to
Oh, no, the Oireachtas. This was all internal. All of this was internal. I don't know how many times I can say I had nothing to do with the guards, never contacted them, had nothing to do with the vetting process.
OK, the crime itself, Catherine, the crime itself, she was convicted at the Special Criminal Court, a court which only deals with gangland terrorists, crime figures, Garda killers. Very serious court to be before. She was convicted. She got 6 years. The crime itself, 2 handguns, a stun gun, ammunition, cable ties, black pillowcases, petrol cans, all found in the car the night she was arrested. And you never asked her what she was going to do with them.
This is a woman who served her prison sentence and was rehabilitated. And we really need to talk about what does rehabilitation mean.
Did you never think to ask her, where were those guns going to end up? Because you have said repeatedly during this campaign, Catherine, that you're a voice for peace.
Absolutely.
And what is a gun other than violence itself? It is only used to threaten, to maim, to disfigure, to injure, to kill people. And you didn't think to ask her, where were those guns going to end up? We know she didn't end up using them.
I abhor violence by anybody, man or woman. This is a question about rehabilitation and the function of our prison service. And obviously it's to protect society first and rehabilitate. And really, that's the issue here. Are we taking rehabilitation seriously, or will we just pick and choose?
Did you ever wonder, even if you didn't ask her yourself, did you ever wonder what was going to happen with those guns and where would they end up?
This is a woman who served her prison sentence, was a model prisoner, was recommended highly. And actually...
So are you saying you didn't wonder?
Actually, this woman was perfectly qualified for the job. And if we could begin to look at what is the story here in relation to rehabilitation, and since this story emerged, and besides the absolute trespassing on the woman's privacy for the purposes of trying to do me damage, you can't imagine how many letters, emails I've received in relation to highlighting the importance of a second chance and of rehabilitation.
Catherine, for the people watching tonight, I mean, some of them are Catherine Connolly supporters, some are Heather Humphrey supporters, and there's a huge cohort in the middle and they haven't made up their mind. Don't you owe them an explanation as to why that you didn't ask her, you didn't ever wonder where these guns would end up?
I think that I have given an explanation over and over. I'm absolutely committed to the concept of rehabilitation. I think the people who engage with me and who listen to me from July onwards will form their opinion based on my record, based on my honesty, based on my sense of integrity.
She pleaded not guilty. Does that not indicate she wasn't fully rehabilitated?
She got a prison sentence and she served it. She served it well.
Can I ask you?
She was a model prisoner. And I know this.
And you admired her and you got references for her.
Absolutely. But
so can I ask you
important.
this? I know she's working in a different area now, but if she came to you tonight and she said, if you get to the Oireachtas, I want to work with you, would you bring her to the Oireachtas with you?
This is all speculation, and the woman won't be. This woman won't be coming, and I think we need to let this woman.
She wouldn't come.
This woman needs to have her privacy restored.
So is that a no, Catherine? Just to be clear, you wouldn't bring her to the Oireachtas?
I'm not going to discuss what people I'm going to have in the Oireachtas with me. And I think we need to let this woman get on with her life. She's gone on to greater things. She won't be looking for a job with me, and she's gone on to greater things. And we need to reflect, really, as a society, how this became a story, how it continues to be a story, and and our approach to rehabilitation.
Okay.
It really is the story. At what stage will we take rehabilitation seriously?
I want to move on. I want to talk to you about your trip to Syria in 2018. And you said at the launch of your campaign, I funded that trip. But that's not true, is it? The taxpayer funded it.
No. I funded it. I answered the question. So the question was asked in a context of, you know, did Syria or somebody or another organisation? I funded it.
But it was out of a parliamentary allowance, so the taxpayer funded it. It wasn't out of your own private cash.
The taxpayer funds my salary. The taxpayer funds the three allowances that I get, one for travel, one for an office, which I back up, and then this particular one, which allows for research and policy. It allows for entertainment, actually, which I've rarely used. And it allows under four different categories.
So the taxpayer paid for it. You also said on no occasion had I anything to do with the government when I was in Syria. But in fact, you were shown around Aleppo by a man called Faras al-Shahabi. He was a well-known regime supporter. He called for the use of heavy weapons and artillery against the Syrian people. He justified mass killing in the country. He's under sanction by the EU for supporting the Assad regime. How did you end up being shown around the country by a man like him, having meetings with him and being seen in photographs with him?
I didn't have meetings with him, and I wasn't shown around the country by him.
Well, where were you shown around?
I met him in the Chamber of Commerce in Aleppo. So,
so you met with him?
Absolutely. A big group of us, the Chamber of Commerce in Aleppo. And he brought us to an area that was utterly destroyed. I understand 40,000 factories. But the context of the trip to Syria was to see the refugees, the Palestinian refugees, to deepen my understanding in relation to that.
Yeah. Did you know that he posted on social media that a 7-year-old who said Assad was committing a Holocaust should die? Were you aware he called for the death of a child?
I'm aware of that now. I cannot honestly recall back then, but certainly it's been brought to my attention so often.
Were you aware that he said anti-Assad journalists were traitors and should be raped? Were you aware then?
No.
The accusation, I guess, here is it's a judgment call, and that you, as a European parliamentarian, could be used and sort of staged, managed in a way and used as propaganda.
It would be very hard to use me as propaganda or to stage manage me, actually, in any sphere. I'm an independent candidate with an independent mind. And I think that it would be very difficult to stage manage me or to manage what I say, because I try to act on conviction.
But would you accept that meeting with particular people, it sort of endorses them, it legitimises them if you're seen in photographs with them and if you talk to them and you let them bring you to the Chamber of Commerce?
The whole trip was much bigger than Aleppo. We went to Damascus, and the first visit we made was to the refugee camp, which I foolishly thought was a tented encampment. It was a city destroyed.
But did you really need to go there? I mean, I think everyone watching tonight would know that the Assad regime is based on chemical bombs, barrel bombs, rape, torture, displays. They don't need to go there to realise that.
Well, actually, it was very helpful to go there and just meet with people and meet with the Palestinians and actually listen to them and get the background and the history of why they were refugees in Syria in the first place. And they had the symbolic key of their house on the wall, and they spoke about that. They spoke about the Nakba going back to 1948, and we got a feeling, a strong understanding of the background to the Palestinian refugee crisis, and 750,000 that were forced to leave in 1948.
So would you do anything differently? Do you not have any regrets about that trip?
I probably wouldn't have met him, probably would have been harder on him. We didn't like the man, as it turned out, ourselves, but that was for just reasons, you know, trust. And we just listened and went and looked at the destruction. And what was evident from my trip to Syria was that people wanted peace. They wanted peace, a beautiful country that was being utterly destroyed.
The Palestinian Solidarity campaign in this country had nothing got to do with that trip, right?
No. Just in relation to that, I had nothing to do with Assad. I'm on record for condemning him. Now, by contrast, Micheál Martin met with Assad, and we know that. And very few questions were asked in actually meeting this man.
Did you speak to Syrian people living in this country afterwards about how upset they were about that?
Yes, absolutely. People came up to me, absolutely. And somebody close to me came up to me who had spoken out repeatedly. And we've worked through all of that. We've worked through it together.
Some of them approached the Labour Party, I understand, and asked them not to back you.
Yeah. People have different views. People have different views.
OK, we've a lot to get through, so we're going to have to go to a break. We're going to take our first break now. Do stay with us and we'll have more of our presidential election big interview with Catherine Connolly. Welcome back. You're watching our presidential election big interview, our first with the two remaining candidates who hope to be President of Ireland. This evening, we're talking to the independent candidate, Catherine Connolly. Catherine, the people we associate with, they often reflect our values, they signal who we are. So I want to ask you about your relationship with Claire Daly and Mick Wallace. They were on that trip with you to Syria. And you know that those two individuals have a particular worldview and they've often been accused of being soft on Russia, for example. Do you share their views on Russia?
You know, Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan was with me in Syria. She's rarely mentioned. She's given me her permission. And community activists were all there. And the question is always framed with my association. And let me say that my introduction to Claire Daly was 2016 and Mick Wallace. And as an independent, in successive elections, we had to be part of a technical. We didn't have to, but to get speaking time.
Formed it, yeah.
Yeah, and so we formed a technical group, and I had the utmost admiration for Claire Daly and her ability to negotiate. And as a result of her negotiation skills, I got chair of the Irish Committee, which was really, really significant and important. And I also became a member of the Public Accounts Committee.
OK, so you had utmost of admiration for a person who said the Russian military build-up on Ukraine's borders was clearly defensive. That was on January 26th, 2022. There was no evidence, she said, that Russia has any desire to invade Ukraine. And as we know, they invaded the following month on the 24th.
You're asking me about my association with Claire Daly, and I'm clarifying how I met Claire Daly and Mick Wallace. Was that.
Do you share her views, though?
We have now a momentum with different parties behind me. I don't share all their views. This is momentous and historical that we have all of the parties almost in the opposition and others who are not in opposition or others who are in other parties backing my candidacy. This is
it a momentum or an anti-government vote, I wonder?
Well, it's historical and it has a momentum and it's a movement. And I don't share. There would be no parties if we were all the same. And so we have come together on an understanding that certain core things are very important. And
so do you share their views on Russia?
I haven't. How does one answer a question like this?
Well,
I have repeatedly, just if I could, I have repeatedly, openly condemned Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, utterly against international law. I have been asked, actually, only recently, Heather Humphreys, the other candidate, accused me of never condemning Russia. Utterly inaccurate. So over and over, I'm being asked questions in relation to Russia, which I'm on the record for condemning, over and over. And so it's difficult to sit and talk about being a candidate in a presidential election and why I'm doing that and who's supporting me. And it really is important that I highlight what's involved here. Parties coming together, over 13,000...
But there are a number of people, Catherine, that have concerns about your views on international affairs, and some of them are on the left, as you know.
My views on international affairs are well known. I'm absolutely a voice for peace. I think war is horrific. In fact, on the day that we go to vote, that will be the 80th anniversary of the UN Declaration.
OK. Can I ask you, would you put Claire Daly or Mick Wallace on the Council of State?
This is ridiculous. I've been asked that already. This is absolutely...
So that's no?
Absolutely. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to speculate on who I'll put on the Council of State, which is a very important body that will advise me in relation to different matters. And it's really important that we don't speculate as to who I'll put on that.
Okay.
I will be looking for diversity and I'll be looking for expertise to help me in relation to that.
OK, so you've talked about being a voice for peace, and we had historical images today of the hostages being released in Israel, Palestinians being released, aid trucks going in, and a ceasefire, for now.
Yeah.
Do you think Trump deserves some credit for that?
He does, absolutely. And I'm hoping that this peace will last.
Should he get the Nobel Peace Prize?
I think that's speculation at this stage. We have the beginning, we have phase 1. We're barely in phase 1. There's phase 2 and phase 3. And there's a long history here of failed attempts. And I don't want to be without hope. We're all grasping at straws here that this will work. But a peace plan takes an awful lot of work. We know from Northern Ireland, which is on a smaller basis, the meticulous and methodical work that goes into making a lasting peace, and also the trauma that the Palestinian people have suffered. Generations of Palestinians wiped out.
How do you characterise a man like Donald Trump? How do you describe him?
Which we don't even know how many Palestinians have died. We don't know how many are still under the rubble.
Yeah.
So any peace plan must look at that and how we're going to deal with that trauma.
I'm interested in your views on Trump, because if you end up in the Áras, you will have to meet him. How do you characterise him? How do you describe him?
Well, it's interesting to watch. He's volatile and he's unpredictable, absolutely. And it's interesting, the comments that have been, the labels that have been used in relation to me, the labels that have been used that I'm a loony left, I'm a nun, I'm populist in the manner of Trump. Different commentators and different papers.
But it's interesting that you say, he's volatile, because if you do become president, you will be asked about that ahead of a visit here. He will hear that you have said he's volatile.
But I think I'm not the only person that said he's volatile, really.
Will you have to bite down on your lip if you meet him?
I don't use words like that, biting down on my lip. I have carried out each role as professionally as I can. And so as Las Ceann Comhairle, and I also functioned as Ceann Comhairle when the Ceann Comhairle was ill. And so I carried out that role to the best of my ability. I met with the former President Joe Biden. I met with Frau van der Leyen.
Do you think the US is dangerous? Because you said in the recent past you didn't trust the US.
Absolutely. It was in the context of arming and resourcing the genocide in Palestine. And that's what has happened. Absolutely, the genocide.
You think the US is dangerous?
In that sense, absolutely. In that sense, absolutely.
OK.
They have resourced and armed a genocide. And, even the word genocide, we can't move off it. Genocide was the slaughter of the Palestinian people. I'm on record for condemning Hamas and the brutal attack. I'm also on record for saying history didn't begin on that day, on the 7th of October. And so we need to use our history, a post-colonised country, the resolution of the conflict in the north by peaceful means, meticulous and methodical, and also our famine, and to build on that and use our voice for peace. And I would say that I have always been an inclusive type person.
All right. OK. I think people have heard what you've had to say on international affairs. I want to ask you about, you're a barrister and you worked for the banks in the repossession of family homes as a barrister. It sort of doesn't really reconcile with being, a TD on the left. Working for the banks on throwing people out of their homes.
You take briefs. The Bar Council has issued a statement on this to clarify the obligation on a barrister.
Yeah. And it's not legally binding, though, is it? It's just customary.
It's interesting that this allegation has been made, I worked professionally as a barrister. In fact, I did quite a lot of work on a pro bono basis, and so do a lot of barristers, and I have the greatest respect for them and the work that they do. And so I acted for clients, and that's what a barrister does. I acted for people who were before the courts because they committed offences. I acted in family law. I acted in different
But when you were
cases.
acting on behalf of the banks, and it's interesting because the left would talk a lot about homelessness, they would talk a lot about a ban on evictions. when you acted for the banks, when people were being thrown out of their family home and you were being paid for that, how did that make you feel? I mean, if you were dealing with a husband and wife who were representing themselves because they couldn't afford counsel.
Actually, what I remember about that time was the difficulty. The court was full, and it was a direct consequence of government policy and the failure of the banks and what government had allowed happen. And I saw...
But how did you feel about it on a moral level?
I saw a county register struggle all the time to bend over backwards to see that nobody was thrown out of their homes. That's what I witnessed. And not an easy time. The government needs to look at what they did and how they allowed this situation to happen.
OK. I want to talk to you about, you know, you're the anti-establishment candidate. And here you are running for sort of the top of the establishment role in the country, if you like. And I'm wondering, aren't you more effective in opposition, holding the government to account, rather than being in a role where you are gagged to a certain extent and you won't be able to say the things that you have said on this campaign and that you say in the Dáil? For example, the statement you issued after the budget last week, saying it had left children and families behind. You just won't be able to issue statements like that.
It's an interesting way to describe me as anti-establishment. I've never described myself as that. I went into the Dáil as a voice, and as a voice to articulate solutions. And so we look at the housing crisis. The housing crisis is a direct consequence of government policy. And we in opposition are often accused of opposition for opposition's sake. That was never part of my DNA. I stood up to articulate a different way of doing things. I stood up to articulate for our economy that we should diversify our economy. The government are now looking at that. I've been a voice for the diversification of our economy for a very long time.
OK, on that financial bent, can I ask you, because Kieran put it to you in the debate last week, what would you do with the salary? And you said you would give some to call. Have you had a chance to think about how much you'll keep, how much you'll divvy up and where it'll go?
Absolutely, and I will be looking at that. I will not.
But you can't tell us tonight?
Not really in the sense of specifying, but I've given a public commitment that I will use my salary or some of it for different projects on the ground.
Out of the 350,000?
I'm going to be looking at that.
OK.
I'm absolutely going to be looking at that.
Who would be moving into the Áras with you?
My current husband.
Your current husband? Does he know you refer to him as that?
He does.
You have two boys. They're too old to be moving into the Áras?
No, yeah, okay. They're 28 and 29.
What is your record on keepy-uppies, Catherine Connolly?
100.
100 keepy-uppies. And what football club are you in talks with at the moment?
I never played football in my life except on the streets of Shantallow.
Yeah, and that clip that
I took
went
part
viral.
in other sports.
Right,
Yep.
That clip that went viral has sort of cut through everything, and so many people have been talking about it. And before we let you go, I'm going to be talking to Heather Humphreys next week.
Yeah.
What positive thing do you have to say about Heather Humphreys?
I actually always found Heather Humphreys lovely, and I had a lot of engagement with her in relation to different matters, the piers on the Aran Islands and projects that were going on for way too long, and asking her questions about that, asking her, putting pressure on her to publish the policy for the islands and in relation to a policy for seaweed. And I always got on very well with, it was the only way I knew Heather. I never met her outside of the Dáil, but across the floor of the Dáil, I found her that she engaged with me and she had a sense of humour.
Yeah, and you will be engaging with her further in one more final debate, I think, on television next week.
That's correct.
All right, independent candidate Catherine Connolly, thank you very much for coming in to us here on The Big Interview.